Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Nick from DraftBit. Thanks for joining us for this live stream today. Today, I've got Joshua Tiernan, who's the founder of No Code Founder. And I'm super excited to have Josh today because he's building something really cool with DraftBit and Xano, which he's going to show you. But Josh had a bunch of kind of cool UI UX questions about how to do certain things in DraftBit and with Xano. And so today, what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of build some stuff live. Josh is building this whole app in public on Twitter. So I'll drop the link to his Twitter in the chat comments here, and you should definitely follow his build along. You can also follow him along at nocodefounders.com. So I don't know if there's anything else that you want to share, Josh, but while I'm putting these things in the comments, maybe just say hi, introduce yourself, your normal spiel.
Yeah, hi everyone. I am Josh GT from No Code Founders. At the moment, I am building this app in public using DraftBit and Xano, and the idea is to create a kind of aggregator for Twitter Spaces, almost like an events app, where you can browse Twitter Spaces like you would with some kind of events app. So rather than at the moment how it is with Twitter Spaces, it's kind of hard to have any kind of discovery. You can only really see what's live at any given time. So this is going to be designed to allow you to search for spaces and also to view scheduled upcoming spaces as well.
Awesome, love it. Why don't I'm going to turn on your screen share here, and maybe could you just walk us around your app real quick, what you've got so far, and maybe show how you've got Xano connected up as well, just to kind of set the context for what we're going to be doing today.
Okay, sure. So it's pretty simple. At the moment, this is like a dark mode concept, which I was playing around with. The main structure of the app's pretty simple. Is that there's just two main pages. The first one is the Spaces page, which is going to be a list view, and then when you're going one level down into an individual space, that's this page here. So this is just some example DraftBit data that's already in there. This page here is actually pulling some data from the Twitter Spaces API at the moment. So these are real spaces. The Xano backend is really that's kind of all set up. I still need to do some further configuration on that, but then that's connected here through this endpoint, which I've set up, which is basically connecting to what I've got set up in Xano, which is basically just connected to the Twitter API, and is at the moment is doing a search for all Twitter spaces that contain the letter A. And that's just a standard, but ultimately I want to be able to allow people to search using the search bar here.
Sweet.
That's it so far.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so why don't I know you had a bunch of questions about how to do a few things in DraftBit, and so why don't we start with your first one, I guess.
Yeah, sure. So the first one might be the most tricky. So at the moment, what I have here, if I can just go onto this. So this is a list of spaces,
Sure.
And there's 3 pieces of data that are being pulled from the API, which here, this is an avatar, this image, which I've not connected yet. This is the Twitter space name, and then this is going to be hosted by and ideally I want the Twitter username or display name here. What this is showing at the moment is the user ID. Because with this Twitter Spaces API, you've got two separate data types, really. You've got the space itself and the user. So at the moment, I'm just pulling data from the space only. So the only information I can get is user ID. So what I want to try and get working is to actually pull the username that's connected to that ID. So you can see at the moment I've got this setup hosted by host is the variable name, and then the variable itself. These are what's the different items that are available. So all I can get here is the creator ID, but I somehow need to connect that to the user.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's a couple ways to do this. I think the recommended way is a Xano solution, which is that you need to do some sort of join in the back end. So basically, you are pulling in. I assume there's like another endpoint that you're using in Xano that has like the ID and the username connected. You know, it's some data table, or you're pulling it from the Twitter API. And ideally, what you would want to do is, for performance reasons, is in your backend to have the for your spaces table in Xano to look up the username based on the creator ID and just put the username in directly in that table in Xano, so it's available to you in the endpoint that you're fetching from Xano. That's the solution for performance reasons. The other thing that we can do is we can set up a nested fetch within a fetch here in DraftBit to fetch the username, and we can just pass the creator ID in as a fetch parameter and return the user ID. That's a solution when maybe your endpoints don't live in the same place, right? Like if we were fetching directly from the Twitter API as opposed to fetching all this data from Xano. But there's a performance impact because you're fetching one piece of information, using that on the client side, and then using that to go hit a second endpoint. So there's a performance impact to that. So again, just to summarize the two options, the better way to do it is to handle this join in the backend in Xano if you can do that. The other way to do that is to do fetch within a fetch in DraftBit.
Okay.
And I see. So George, our head of product, is he's much more familiar with Xano, by the way. You can customize your output within Xano with quote unquote add-on. So I don't know if you have that set up in Xano yet, but if just for pure like demonstration purposes, if you know where, if you have an endpoint that fetches both creator ID and username, then we can connect that to DraftBit, and I can show you how to do the fetch within a fetch process just for demo purposes. How do you want to proceed?
Okay, so yeah, okay, that makes sense. At the moment, I think I'm getting it all that information through. I think I might. Let me check what I actually have here.
You could also, maybe if you pull up your Xano as well, we can kind of look at what data you're pulling in and how. I'm not going to be as useful in showing you how to do like the database joins because I'm just not as great at Xano as I am at DraftBit. But yeah.
Okay, now, so I don't think I have that connected yet for users.
Okay.
I thought maybe pulled that information through as well to the spaces, but I don't think it does.
I'll turn this screen off while you're finding your password and stuff.
All right, cool. Sorry.
We're JT uses Safari normally, but this streaming platform doesn't really do a great job at handling Safari. So he's got to move all his passwords over to Chrome to just be able to log in.
Okay, I'm in. So
Okay, cool. All right, so let's just look at your data real quick. So you've got, and by the way, is this dummy data or is this actual data that's being pulled in from Twitter?
this is real data, yeah. So at the moment, I don't have any of the data going into a database in Xano. I've not set up a database because I think probably it's going to be based on search, like the search bar. So because the user is going to be changing for every user, I didn't think that storing it in a database would be the best approach.
Let's set aside like I don't want to go too into the weeds on how we are going to structure your queries and records and things like that, because I want to kind of stay focused on the front end, but I think what you said makes sense. So my first question would be, where in Xano do you have a data table or a query that matches up a user's ID with their like username? Do we have anywhere
No,
in Xana where that exists yet?
I don't have that existing yet. No.
Okay, so we may not, until we have that connected somewhere, like literally we need the information to exist in the same place in order to be able to do what you're saying. But what I can do is kind of show you in an abstract sense how to do it in DraftBit. So let's go back to DraftBit for a second. And all right, so you the first thing I should mention is, like, right now in the properties panel on the right hand side, you're seeing the contents of the fetch that you're pulling into DraftBit. And so again, I'm probably being overly simplistic here, and the stream quality is not great, but like if you were connecting the user ID to the username in Xano, then you would just get that username automatically in the fetch response, and you would, instead of having the user ID variable mapped to this hosted by text component, instead you would map the username. But just for simplicity's sake, like, we don't have that yet, I don't think. Is that correct? I see name.
Yeah, so this is what it is actually there, but it's like the way it's set up is that so I'm not really experienced with APIs. But there's this like parameter user.fields is on the Spaces API, and then you have all the user fields under that. So it's like a parameter within it.
Can I see the fetch response again?
Yeah.
Or yeah. Yeah, the stream quality is what's I'm struggling with here. Okay, so go back to that text component and go to the hosted by and show me the drop down again for the variables. Okay. Okay. I think I know. All right, so you're getting you're basically getting like arrays within the fetch response. So let's do this. On the left-hand side in the layer tree, 2 lines above that text component, select the view, and inside of the view, let's add a new fetch. And then move that text component inside of that fetch.
Okay.
And then select that fetch, the new fetch. I think actually you didn't want both texts inside there. You only wanted the one that we're dealing with.
All right. Sorry. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, unfortunately, you moved the wrong text component. Can you?
So.
Oh, well, when you add things inside, when you nest things, they go to the bottom, not to the top.
Okay.
So select the top fetch text component and move that outside. Yeah. Cool. All right. So select the fetch now, and what do we want to do here? I think I'm messing this up. Inside of that view where you put the fetch, can you also put a list? I think what we actually wanted was a list.
So put a list under
Put a
the
list
fetch.
under the view. And then select that list. And then I think what we want to do is we want to map. Select that drop down there. We want to map wherever the array is that contains the response of the of like the user properties. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I'm guessing it's going to be this one, but I can check it. Yeah, includes users.
Okay.
So
Yeah. So map that data field to the includes users. I think this should work. And then move that text component inside the list, not inside. Well, we're going to end up deleting that fetch component. And then select that text component. And I think hopefully there should be in the data variable dropdown, there should be like a host name now, I think.
Hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
So, it looks like I'm not exactly sure what's going on here because I don't know anything about the Twitter Spaces API, but for some reason that I think it's the way that the data is returned. It's showing all of these host names. Is this real data again, or is this fake data?
Yeah, this is real.
It's real. It's a little hard to debug like what the fetch response is because the screen resolution isn't high enough for me to really like dig into it, and
Yeah,
I can't really see what's coming back from Zano. But just like at a practical level, what's going on here is within each Twitter space, it looks like there are many users associated with that Twitter space. And so all the list is doing is it's iterating through all of the records that are inside of that one Twitter space record, and it's
yeah,
showing you all of the usernames that are associated with it. Um, Either that or there's a bug. What I would what I would ideally want to see you do as you kind of clean up this data in the back end um, is like basically merge this stuff on the Xano side and create like a much cleaner fetch response that comes back to the client in a much cleaner way. Because really what's happening here is like with lists within lists, you're asking the client to do a lot of iterating through data that's not organized, and there's performance uh, impacts to that. So
yeah,
I think not to like uh, I know that you're kind of learning back end and front end at the same time, and not to like push this problem onto Xano. But what I would do is I'd work with the Xano guys on how to extract the information that you want from the Twitter API response and put it in your Xano table kind of at the same level as basically get the username in the same level as the space name. And then you can fetch a much cleaner response into your UI and not worry about some of the complexities and nuance that's going on here.
yeah. Cool. Yeah, I'll do that. That's no problem. Thanks so much.
George chimed in. He says it seems that the response from Twitter is broken down into dictionaries that you might have to merge, maybe just to guess. Again, like we're kind of guessing what's going on based on what we can see on the screen.
Yeah,
But yeah, the good news is like there is the power on the DraftBit side to handle these things. But I would push for cleaner queries.
yeah. Cool. That makes sense. Thanks for that.
All right, so we kind of half solved that one, but what else? What else we got?
Next up is okay. So a bit simpler is so when someone is selecting a space from the list view, it's going to take them to space view. So one level down into that specific space. So what I've got set up so far is, what do I have set up?
I think I know where you're headed with this. So you want to basically
Yeah,
be able to navigate from the list view to the item view.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Cool. All right, so open up your data tab on the left-hand side. We'll create a new endpoint to fetch just one individual and go into your
okay.
spaces connected service. And then we're going to add an endpoint. And we're going to do, rather than fetching all spaces, we're going to fetch one space. So you can name it whatever you want. And it's a GET request. And so the syntax is / spaces. And then / two curlies, space ID, or whatever you want to call a name. You're basically creating a variable. And then what I don't know is how Xano handles IDs, but it's going to ask you for basically a test value. So maybe just go into Xano real quick, grab an ID of one space that we can use as a test value. I don't know if it goes 1, 2, 3. Oh, it doesn't. I
Yeah,
would say I would type like I would not do 1 because sometimes 1 is like a default. So I would do like 2 or 3 or 4.
okay.
Cool. I don't think there's any headers in this request, so let's test it and see what we get. Oops. All right, so the endpoint syntax isn't right. Forward slash.
Um,
I don't know. Is it space?
yeah,
Space
maybe
ID,
space.
or is it? No.
So does this bit here, is this bit here relevant? Like, does it matter what's in here? Or is this just a new variable that's been created?
It's just creating a new variable.
Okay.
So let's go into Xano and let's figure out what syntax they need to fetch an individual record. Maybe you have to set up this endpoint in Xano before you're able to use it. But I would think that I don't know. Is anyone watching who knows Xano, who knows what we're doing wrong? This is how I would do it. It's definitely spaces forward slash. It's not like uppercase or anything, is it? Is it like uppercase spaces? All right. A couple of people are saying that you have to actually generate the endpoint in Xano before you can use it. So in Xano, let's go over to Xano and let's set up, go to API, I think it is. I see. All right, so you need to create a get endpoint to fetch an individual space.
Oh, okay.
How comfortable are you doing with doing this?
Yeah. Not massively.
Super easy. I think you had it. I think you had it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Go back one step. Click CRUD again. Spaces. Yep. Get single is what we want.
Yeah. Nice.
Yep, that's good. Let's just run and debug once. Let's just to see. I would put like 3 or 4 or something in there just so we can see.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So save all that.
Cool. I think that's good to go.
Okay. All right. So let's go back over to Xano. That should work now. It's spaces, lowercase.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Nice.
Save that. You can close out of here. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to now map all the data on this screen to the new endpoint that we just created. So that means replacing the fetch component endpoint with the new endpoint that we just created.
All right, yeah.
Okay. And then you're going to want to map all of the data on the screen to this endpoint.
What have we got?
Yeah, you had it. So you've got the variable created already. So you just need to, oh, that's weird. Maybe delete and retype. I think you cannot have spaces in a variable.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so there we go. All right, so select the space name value.
Nice. So yeah, this is the same issue again, isn't it?
Yeah,
So I
same
can sort
thing.
that
You
later.
fix, yeah, solve that later.
Yeah.
Is there any other data that you're pulling through?
So these are going to be like avatars from the. Can I pull avatars?
I assume so.
Yeah.
I assume you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you are going to want like faces of people who are participating or speaking or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So practically speaking, what you would do here, again, this goes back to like data structure, but um, you'll be pulling in the data on the users, like the speakers, from the Twitter API, and then what I would do is I would do some backend work in Xano to get all that information lined up as like an array of speakers attached to the space, and then you can pull the data from the Twitter API that you want, whether if you want their usernames, if you just want their photos, whatever it is. And the way that you would do it on the draft bit side is once you had that data coming in the way that you wanted to see it is, again, like there's a fetch that's feeding all of the information on this screen. And so you have information about the space. So you're fetching individual items information, space name, host name, I don't know, maybe there's a photo of the host or something like that. I don't, whatever data
Yeah.
about this that's meta to the space, you're fetching that with their fetch item. And then information about things like speakers or listeners or whatever is going to be an array within that space item. And so the way that you would retrieve information from an array is with a list in DraftBit. So you would put a list inside of this fetch item. The list is going to iterate through every item in the array. So you would tell the list, hey, I want you to look at the speakers array or the participants array or whatever. And you
Yeah.
would, underneath the list, you would iterate through and map data that's relevant to this, again, the speakers or the listeners or whatever. So you've got the UI of the screen more or less set up. I think the only thing that you may have to do is just the that list that's kind of at the bottom. You're not going to want it inside of a fetch. You're going to want that list to be a uh, meta to the top level fetch that's higher up. I wouldn't do that right now because you've got your example data feeding through that one fetch, and if you move that list out of it, it'll get broken from the example data and then you'll just see nothing on your screen. So I think it's fine for now. But once you do have real data pulling through, you can move that list out of that second fetch and into the first fetch to iterate through the speaker's information.
Yeah. Cool. That makes sense.
Cool. So we've got a couple more steps to go still. The next thing that we need to do is go to the on the same screen, go all the way up in the layer tree to the screen, the top level screen component. Sweet. And do you see on the right hand side navigation parameters?
Yeah.
We basically need to tell the screen, hey, you're going to be looking for a space ID to be passed to you so that you can use it in this fetch parameter. So so it looks like there's already a parameter called ID that's being passed to the screen. And the reason why this already exists is actually pretty cool. It's because you've already got a fetch on the screen that's looking for an ID. So DraftBit is already essentially intuiting that you are going to want to be looking for an ID. So this is actually already set up. Now that I'm thinking about it, that's probably coming from the example data fetch that's on your screen. Do me a favor and just give the whole screen, the whole browser window a quick refresh. And I want to see if we're detecting the space ID as well. Okay, we're not. That's okay. So in that first fetch component that we mapped to the space, select that.
The first space component.
The first
which
fetch
one's that?
component. The
Oh,
first
first
fetch
one.
component. Yep, select that. And then do you see in the configuration on the right-hand side, do you see where it's looking for a space ID? You can actually just map that to the navigation parameter for ID. Again, we haven't told this thing what ID to look for yet. So I don't think it's going to necessarily work. But now let's go back to the list of spaces screen. And then we basically need to tell the UI, all right, when you navigate to the individual spaces item view, we need to pass the ID of the space with it. So yep, so you select the touchable, go over to the right-hand side and click on the fourth tab for interactions. We're going to say, hey, when you, okay, you've already got it set up. So when you navigate to the space, you're going to pass the ID. Okay, so you've already got that. I don't know, is that ID the ID of the space? It probably is. Just select that from the dropdown real quick. I just want to see what results are there.
Yeah, that must be the ID.
Okay, yeah, it looks like it's the ID that says, okay, cool. So you've already got that set up. So now we're saying, all right, navigate to this screen and bring the ID of the space with it. And so now, hopefully, at sort of the top of your builder window, go back to your space list real quick. It should just work. We'll see. Hit that that little preview triangle. Yep, that one. Let's just test it. Hmm. Can you do me a favor and just up above that, can you select the other preview triangle? I want to scan the QR code, see if I can get to preview on my device. So Draftbit has a live preview functionality, which is just, I don't know why web preview is not loading on your device, but I've got it running on my mobile device. And so what should happen is if I go to, I think I know what's happening, Josh. Probably what's going on is sometimes your preview can get bogged down if you have sort of like an infinite list of data coming in or a very long list. And so right now you're just pulling a list of spaces, but that, I don't know how many spaces Twitter has at any one time, but I'm going to guess it's many. And so if you look at my device, you can see like how much data is being pulled into my screen.
Yeah.
The web may be choking on that. So what you always want to do is you want to delimit or you want to limit the number of results. And if you want a lot of results on your screen, you should do paginate.
Okay.
So one enhancement to your endpoint that I would probably suggest is that you limit it to like 10 or 20 results, and then you can always load more from the server. But regardless, what should happen is I'm going to just click on the second result. It was like, you can, by the way, you can get out of this preview mode. I don't know why the web is not loading, but you can go back to your canvas view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this ACCA space and just see if it loads the ACCA space. It looks like it's not loading it. So let's debug it a little bit. So go to your, I guess let's just step through it. So you've got your touchable, and you're passing an ID to the space screen. And with that ID, you're passing the ID of the space. So that all looks good. So let's go to the space screen. And so let's start here. Go to the data tab. You're receiving the ID. Let's just put in a test value just so we can see something. Let's type 3 or something like that. Okay, yet another space. Okay, and then let's go to that first fetch again. And you're passing ID as the space ID. And so for the test value of 3 works. Okay. I think what's happening is, let me see the fetch response on that screen that you're on right now. I don't think these data sets are joined. So like what's an ID, like that Drake versus Kanye, what's the ID of that space in your fetch response? It's not like 1, 2, 3, 4, it's probably something else, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like all of our roads are leading to the same response. I would probably, like, next week, I would focus on some Xano data structure stuff. But basically what's happening is you've got like a list of Twitter spaces that are coming from the Twitter API, right? And those have IDs of whatever that random string of characters was that you just highlighted on the screen.
Yeah.
And then you've got your test spaces data in Xano 1, 2, 3, 4 with like dummy data, and they're not aware of each other, right? Like the IDs don't match. So your job to be done in Xano is basically getting the real data from the Twitter API pulled into your Xano spaces table in a way that is readable by the front end. The front end is not like psychic. It doesn't know what you're trying to do. You need to have better data structure. So this is like, as I understand it, this is Xano's superpower is bringing in external data, cleaning it up, organizing it how you want. And I would just invest some time now that your UI is like more or less set. I would invest some time in like some really good data structure with the Xano folks. So sorry that the always comes back to this, but what we did is valid, right? We're passing an ID of a space to an item view screen. The item view screen is going to look at that ID, is going to give you the data for that one item. We just don't have the proper data to work with at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Where else can we try and do some stuff here?
So there's just a couple of other things. The search bar there, I want users to be able to pass a value through to the Twitter API, search based on that value, and then return the results in the list view.
So yeah, that's super doable. We've done that before. Maybe not with Xano's API, but I know that I've done it with Airtable's API. It's just another flavor of a GET request where you're getting, I think like the Airtable API syntax is like filter by record or something like that. So the syntax is like you get a list of items filtered by some variable, and then you map that variable to your search text input on your screen. And then depending on the API, either you have a submit button and you get a list of search results, or some APIs actually give you like a live set of data, like as you type, the search results are automatically refreshing, which is I know what the Airtable API does.
Okay.
We're not going to be able to do that until you've got some things set up on the back end for your, you basically need an endpoint to hit, right? Get list of records filtered by this parameter, this data variable that the front end is providing me, and I will give you the results that you want. We won't be able to, we can't do the front end of that until you've got the back end like query set up for the front end to look at.
Okay.
But it's absolutely possible. It's something that we can do very easily in DraftBit.
Okay. That's great. Cool. So the last thing is this switch here, this toggle, and it doesn't have to be a toggle, but what that's supposed to do is to switch between live and scheduled events. So again, it's a separate search. It's a separate query into the Twitter API. So I think probably the simplest way would just be to remove this toggle and have two separate pages, right? So that there'd be one for the live spaces and one for scheduled. That's probably the simplest.
Man, I feel like I should just go find the office hours where we did this with Airtable, because I have literally the same. I have a walkthrough of how to do this with the Airtable API, and it can be adapted to Xano. You can, again, this actually is like another flavor of search. So I just mentioned that like with search, the syntax would be, get list of records, filtering on, this field name, so it would be like name of space or whatever, equals this variable, and the variable is provided by the text input search box. You could just concatenate to that query, and if data variable Boolean, live or scheduled is true, false, filter on live scheduled accordingly. And so it's basically just another, you can have the same query feeding this page, and you can basically use a whole bunch of different, search box, live versus scheduled. You can have as many parameters feeding information into this one query as you want. You think about like apps that have advanced filters where you like expand and you can toggle all these things. It's just all feeding into the same query. So you can do this really easily without having to like build a screen for scheduled and do all this stuff. But what I would do with Xano, it's still unclear to me whether you're going to be aggregating all this information in Xano, and it's a Xano endpoint, or whether you're going to try and just hit the Twitter API and grab information from Twitter and then pass that data into Xano queries. I don't really understand what you're trying to do with your data structure yet. So again, I would like go back and invest some time with it in Xano, like getting your data more fleshed out. Very common problem, by the way. This happens all the time. Like it's always going to be iterative between front end and back end. But yeah, you could make this screen really badass by just having the toggle for live versus scheduled and the search box as two separate variables that are hitting the same lookup query to your API. So once you have that data, that endpoint in a better state, we can come back to this and we can get it all set up. And it honestly, like once you have the data in the right way, the front end starts to feel like magic.
Yeah. Yeah, I can completely see that. So with what you were saying there with the query, would that be all built on the fetch for that list with with conditional queries as well, based on whether the toggles?
They're not really conditional. You can think about it as I'm trying to think of like what a more no code metaphor is. Like if you're familiar with like Microsoft Excel, it's almost like nested if statements.
Right. Okay.
So they're not. I guess in that way they are kind of conditional, but you're not like conditionally showing and hiding things. You're just basically telling the server, I'm providing you the following inputs. Give me the data back based on these inputs. And so it's just continuously updating the query results as you provide different inputs to the server. So if the API is real time, meaning like every time an input changes, it refetches, then the screen will just update live as you're changing the inputs. If it's not real time, then what you would have is like more of a submit button where you would say, toggle this, type this, submit, and then you would get your results back.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna go look and try and find right now that we literally did this in a very advanced way with Airtable, and so folks who don't believe me when I say like this is really awesome, I'm gonna try and find that video and post it in the chat real quick. Yeah, here it is. Advanced functional search bar with Airtable. So in this example that I'm pasting in the chat, we did this exact screen. It was it had a search bar, and then this was an API. I was building like an app that had to do with coffee. And so our toggle was not scheduled versus live, it was decaf versus regular. And so you could type Mon said, we believe you, Nick. You could toggle decaf versus not decaf on, type something into the search bar, and your results were just updating live. So definitely check out that tutorial, and I'm sure you can do the same thing with Xana. Did we cover all your questions? I feel like the answer to all your questions was no. You go fix your data and come back to us. So hopefully it doesn't feel that way.
No, I know, and I know exactly what I need to do now. So thanks for walking me through those things.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, just for everyone who's still stuck with us, I'm off next week. So it sounds like Josh is going to go do some Xano stuff next week. And then maybe the week after we can come back to all this, maybe go live again, whatever you want. And we'll get you leaping ahead here.
Cool. Sounds great. Thanks,
Awesome.
Nick.
Thanks for spending this time with me. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you soon.